I set out to find the cheapest hot tent and tent stove on Amazon, and this is what I came up with. This is the Hippier FX. Who knows how they come up with these brand names, but the Hippier FX teepee hot tent and a Vevor tent stove. I paid $80 for this tent and I paid $80 for that stove. All in, after taxes, I was in under $170. That is a smoking deal for a hot tent and stove, but are they total junk or are they worth that? Come camping with me and let's find out.
Gear up and get outside.
Wasn't very clear, but you got to actually put this inner tent grommet over this first. Grommet, ball, and then it's ready to go. Stand up. Hopefully I'll pull the stakes out again. So this camp out has been sort of bizarre in terms of weather. Just a couple days ago, it was dumping snow and it was below 0 temperatures. Now it's like yesterday it hit 40 degrees. We got a little bit of rain last night. We got quite a bit of wind in this tent and it held up pretty well. But it's not too bad today. Kind of cool and windy, but it could be worse. I was hoping for some real snow, but no such luck. On that note, I was pretty impressed with how well this held up in the wind because it got pretty gusty. And this is my first time actually camping in a teepee tent. Many of you probably have a lot of times, but this is a first for me. So I didn't know entirely what to expect, but as I've heard, they're pretty darn stable. There's only that single pole that goes up in the middle, and then this is an octagon shape, so there's 8 stakes you stake out around the edges. It does leave some air exposed, so I got some wind coming in, but it wasn't so cold that that was a problem. I had the tent stove going for a couple hours until it ran out of wood, and then I just put my quilt over top of my sleeping bag and I was toasty warm all night long. That wind and the tent flapping was kind of white noise, kind of distracting at times, but with the river nearby, it was lovely. I can think of worse places to be. I didn't even put out all 4 guy lines. I only hooked up 2 guy lines and it did just fine. We got some rain last night too. Not a ton, but some, and no issues. No leaks. When I got up in the morning, everything was dry. Well, let's do a walk around. I like to talk about a few different things and we'll start with build quality. Overall, for 80 bucks, I'm pretty impressed by the quality of this tent. It's made from a ripstop polyester material. It's all black. It's got a fair amount of heft to it, so it's not super duper thin. On the inside, it has this reflective material. I've seen that on a couple of cheaper tents that I've had now. I don't know why they think that's maybe a great idea. It does reflect the heat in, so it's kind of nice at this point when it's in the winter and you've got a stove going, but in the summer, that would just be ridiculous hot. I mean, I would not use this tent in the summer for that reason alone. Now, seams are double stitched, and for the most part, they're seam sealed inside. Even this one here, I don't know if you can tell there, but that is sealed there on the zipper seams. And here we got seam sealer. We got this kind of overhem here that's also taped, so that should help with the leaking. I don't know if that will last forever, but it looks okay. Some of these, this screen material is actually like glued or welded on. glued, I'm sure. Now on the internal, this is one reason I like this tent, is because it came with this internal mesh. Now, when I was looking at all the hot tents for 80 bucks or less on Amazon, most of them were just selling you this as part of a hot tent separately from the actual teepee portion. This one came together, teepee, outer and inner, and that's great. Although I won't use that again in the winter. That's really only handy, I think, in the summer when you're trying to keep bugs out. And then, like I said, I wouldn't use this in the summer because it's probably gonna be so darn hot. That said, it's decent quality, but this inner has mesh on either end. On the short ends, it's got the polyester material. It does have some nice tie backs here, just the kind of classic little knob there to hold it back. Uses SBS zippers. SBS zipper out here too. I'm pleased with how they did around the stove jack, so they did tape those seams as well. On the tie back for the doors, it's interesting. It's got this little fastener that you can tighten. It's a different kind of rubbery, plasticky material as opposed to just another piece of nylon loop webbing, but works well. I like that it has vents. It has two of these vents, one on either side. It does have a little Velcro piece here that you can use to kind of prop it open, although honestly I don't see that being super effective because it is kind of holding its own anyway. It's got these guy line attachment points that are pretty robust, and it has 4 of those. That pull design is simple enough. I mean, there's 4 different sections, so it breaks down pretty small. Then up top inside, there's like this foam ball that you put on the end of the pole to stick up there. I thought that's kind of a simple but clever way to prop your tent out without risking putting a hole anywhere. There's a fair amount of slack in it right now, but that's because it's windy and I haven't been super diligent about adjusting it, but I'm not too worried about that. And one thing I was happy to see is that they included this little stove jack. It didn't say that on the description, so I wasn't expecting to get that. I thought it was gonna be without, but it does come with it if you're wondering. So I just cut the hole and there it is. This is like a fiberglass material coated in silicone, but look, it's already kind of burning a little bit there, so maybe it doesn't have the highest heat resistance, but it seems to be working. It's not melting or anything like that. Overall, I'm quite pleased with the fasteners they use, like these here. These are nice little tensioners. Even the stakes are decent. They're pretty nice. They're made of aluminum and they give you plenty. It drives me nuts when a company doesn't include enough stakes, but here they do. They include, I think it's 15 stakes. There's 8 for the main tent, 4 for the inner tent, 4 more for guy lines, and then there was 1 extra. So that's handy. I appreciate that. 4 guy lines that have these nice little aluminum toggles on them as well. Has a cinch strap it comes with, pole bag, stake bag, and then it all fits into this nice little compact bag pretty well. So that's a decent for, you know, checks those basic quality boxes, even if it's not the fanciest of material. Looking now at the stove is pretty decent as well. There's a few things I like about it, and a few things I don't like about it. I did burn this stove in at home, by the way, before I brought it camping to make sure all those oils were cooked off and it had that patina already. Then I knew, all right, I'm not gonna risk any weird fumes in the tent. But it looks pretty good. That top plate is aluminum. It's overall, it's pretty nice and feels like a decent quality, although it is pretty thin gauge steel. We'll see how long that stainless treatment lasts. There's a couple parts, especially around where the pipe comes out, that it looked like it had been rubbed pretty good, so I think there's some risk for corrosion in a couple places. Now this is a folding stove. The folding stove idea is great in concept, except the thing I don't like about this one is that it's really just a pain. There's 8 of these little knobs, 8 of these little screws you have to undo and put back in, and they don't give you extras. This is one part I don't like about this, and I just know one's gonna get lost somewhere along the way. So even though you can fold it down, it takes so long to do it. It's not like some that are very mechanical and they fold. This is like screws and slots and piece by piece. So I don't think I'm gonna fold it down when I leave. I think I'm just gonna leave it as is. One thing I really don't like is this chimney. Now the chimney has these numbers. You can see those numbers stamped on there, 7, 6, 5, and so on. It's supposed to go in order from smallest diameter to largest, which goes at the bottom. And then you clamp each section together with one of these hose clamps. Pretty janky if you ask me. In theory, they're supposed to nest inside of each other. Well, that's a good idea, but it doesn't really work that great, especially after you've used it once and there's soot and creosote building up in there. Plus, you're supposed to put one of these hose clamps on each segment at the joint, and that is just a pain. And they slip too. You can't really get it tight enough to be just right. So I don't love that design. I mean, luckily it wasn't that cold this time on this trip, but if it were cold, I would be just cursing all left and right as I'm trying to put that together with frozen fingers. So I don't love that about it. It also leaves some of them loose, so it does wobble a little bit. I'm not seeing smoke leak out inside, so I'm not super worried. And then that little cap on top just sits on there pretty loose as well, so that's not gonna stay on too well. And it's supposed to be a spark arrestor. It has the cap, but with no mesh inside there, I really don't see that being ultra useful. I would want to get some mesh around that, and you'd have to be compliant in places that require it. Like if the Forest Service does allow these in summertime sometimes, you've got to have like 1/8 inch mesh, I think it is, or maybe it's 1/4 inch mesh to be compliant, something like that. Check out your own local regs. Plus, I mean, that's just a smart thing to do to help prevent wildfires, right? Not too worried about it right now in the middle of winter where everything's covered in snow and rain. Couple more things on that stove. I like how the dampers work on this one. This one just slides back and forth, you know, open to fully close or somewhere in the middle. That's easier to operate than some, including this other one I got on Temu that twisted. I did another video on that, by the way, if you want to check it out if you haven't seen it already. And then here's the other damper. I don't like how close it is to this. You really got to use like I am with stick, or you got to use a glove or something. And it's kind of open in the middle. The actual piece of metal inside is a much narrower, about 1/4 inch smaller in, I'd say, radius than the pipe is. So no matter, even if you have that fully closed, there's still some air getting through, but I suppose that's probably by design. These side panels just kind of come off, which I'm actually glad for, because it's so tight in here, this tent, based on where you have to place that I pulled this off most of the time. Oh, hot, whoops. Yeah, beware, it gets hot where it's touching the stove. Anyway, I had to put it like this. And that's one thing I don't love about this, although I think with some jimmying around I could adjust it, but I don't love the placement of the stove relative to where your bed's gotta go. It's just super tight in there. I made it work. I even got a chair in there that I can sit in. I was sitting in there watching a movie last night. This is one thing I wanted to check. Can I sit on a chair inside? And I can. It's a little tight. My head's bumping that wall. I could probably scooch in the middle. Got to be careful about that stove when I'm moving around. But if there's a storm out there, sitting in here reading a book, writing in my journal, watching a movie, whatever. Nice. And just a reminder, I just bumped my arm on that pipe. Didn't burn me, but in a half a second it was touching or less. It got through some of this polyester flannel shirt. Clearly there's some polyester in there. Hot. Gotta watch out maneuvering around this thing. It's tight. It almost makes me wish I had a stove where the pipe came out the center or the front so that I could tuck this back, but I guess that wouldn't work as well if it came out the front based on airflow. Anyway, that's how it's got to be, and it works. It just means the way I have my bed situated, it wasn't super convenient to be able to restock it while still laying down. I had to kind of get up or even stick half my body out, reach around. It was just awkward, so I just didn't do it in the night. But if it was a real cold night and I wanted to do that, that's something to consider. So it's hard for me to say at this point how durable these will be over time. I just got them, this is my first time using them. I think they're gonna do okay, although I already noticed one little pin-size hole on the tent, probably from an ember falling on it, and that's just the risk you run with the polyester or synthetic hot tent. I can put a piece of tenacious tape on there or something and not worry about it leaks, and it's in a spot I'm not really worried about. But things like that, you know, I kind of expect over time. The zippers not being the highest quality, maybe those will fail in time. But you know, as often as I'd probably use a tent like this, I think it's gonna last a while. So for 80 bucks, and it includes that inner, for those of you that are interested in that, that's great, because all the other tents I was looking at in the same price range, like 90 bucks, 100 bucks, and even more, were only the outer. Now, my guess is maybe those are a little nicer. A lot of them were a little bigger. This one is pretty small. I fit in there as one person. You could do 2 people without the stove, but if you got a stove in there, you're only one person and maybe a dog. But for me, solo camping with me and my gear, it worked just fine. As far as ease of use goes, now I found it pretty easy to set up. There's not a whole lot to it. The only thing was, you stake it down first, you lay it down, stake it out, and I pulled the stakes out too far, had too much tension on them, so when I went to put that center rod up, it pulled some of the stakes out that are kind of in wet, soft ground. Now, again, people that have used TV tents, you probably already know that. I don't think it's any factor of this tent. It just is something you gotta be thinking about. But it is pretty easy though to get adjusted. You can tension them up after by pulling these little toggles here, so that was great. The inner tent took me a little bit to get it situated just right in relation to the tent stove and the door. There are 2 doors, there's one on either side, so you can kind of choose how you place it, but there's only one stove jack, so the stove is gonna go right there. That was the only thing that was tricky, is just figuring out the exact exact right configuration, but once you do that once and got it sorted out, it's probably not going to be a question in the future. So this tent weighs 5.4 pounds. I weighed it on a scale at home, and the stove weighs about 11 pounds. I mean, you're probably not going to take that stove backpacking, but I suppose you could. And the tent is a little bit heavy for a teepee tent like that. You can definitely find a lot lighter ones for backpacking that are made of nylon or Dyneema or something, but they're going to cost a lot more. So for the money, again, probably a pretty good deal. So what do I like about this tent? Well, I like that it's 80 bucks, and I like that that stove is 80 bucks. That is a smoking deal. One of the reasons they are that cheap is because they're being sold by Chinese companies. They're being fulfilled by Amazon, so they did still get to me pretty darn quick. But we're seeing a lot of these companies selling direct to us consumers, or just through Amazon or Temu or Alibaba or AliExpress, you know, one of these online marketplaces, and they're coming straight to us. It sort of cuts out some of those brick and mortar retailers that we know and love from the US, or even a lot of US companies who aren't really making budget-friendly gear anymore. But whose fault is that? And what can we do to improve it? I'm really interested in learning more and trying to figure out how we can get more US companies making budget-friendly gear, because man, this makes it attainable for a lot of folks to go out and winter camp in a hot tent that is going to keep you warm, is going to keep you dry, and it's going to do the job. Is it the nicest thing out there? No. But I do like that it's compact. I like that it includes everything you need. For that 80 bucks, I got the tent outer, I got the tent inner, and a stove jack, plenty of stakes and guy lines to boot. The stove for 80 bucks is also a fine deal. You know, you get a totally functional stove. Now it is kind of compact, so that's one thing I don't love about it, is you have to cut your wood down to size, but also if it were a bigger stove, that'd be way overkill for this size of tent. So, you know, there's that double-edged sword right there. It'd be nice if you could just take your standard 16-inch cut firewood out of the pile and put it in one of these things. That's not the case. But I'm also, if I had a big stove in there, I'd be burning the thing down, so none of that either. As I mentioned, I don't love how that tent stove folds. I think that Vevor stove is just a little bit janky to collapse down and then to set back up. And especially that chimney with those hose clamps, man, they should just do like everybody else does and just have some that are fitted where it's got a larger end and a skinnier end. Every pipe is the same and you just stack them up and you're good to go. Or one of those more rollable ones that are super lightweight. I suppose that could work too. This is something in the middle and I'm not a huge fan. One thing I don't like about this tent, to be honest, is the color. I'm not a big fan of black tents. They didn't have this available in other colors. Maybe they will at some point, but it's black on the outside with that reflective material on the inside. I think that diminishes the versatility a bit. Now, a fully versatile teepee tent would be one that you'd be happy to use all year round, you know, from spring, summer, winter, and fall. Use it backpacking or use it car camping, whatever you want to do. You know, that's like maximum versatility right there, right? Well, I'm not going to use this one in the summer because I already know I'm going to get too dang hot in there. Unless I'm really high mountain camping in alpine areas, and then at night maybe I'd appreciate that reflective material on the inside. You know, but some people like the blackout tent, so maybe you're going to like that, and sure, that's great. Though I do appreciate that it's ripstop. Again, for the cheapest tent there, it's still some kind of ripstop in that polyester material. I should note that this one is a little bit smaller than some of the other teepee tents out there, so just be aware of that. You're going to be in tighter quarters, and I can't do 2 people in there with a stove. Great for solo camping in the winter, not great if you want to take a friend. Truth be told, I like this tent almost as much as I'd like it if you subscribe to this channel for more content like this. So what do you think? Would you buy this tent off of Amazon? Would you buy this stove off of Amazon? Overall, I don't think this tent and stove are total junk for that price. I think they're worth it, especially when you compare it to the alternatives out there, either really high-end, really expensive tents that are maybe lighter weight or made of fancier materials or have some unique design elements, versus this that is simple, but it gets the job done. It has everything you need in one kit. Man, it's hard to complain, really. If you're interested in checking this tent and stove out yourself, I included some links in the description below. It's pretty interesting to see budget-friendly gear like this coming off of Amazon in just huge numbers. I mean, when you search for hot tent, there are thousands of options now. So what are your thoughts? What do you think about this? Do you think a tent like this is worth it? Do you think that looks like an interesting product in itself? And what are your thoughts about Amazon becoming this marketplace for all kinds of brands that have names that just have slapped together syllables that no one's ever heard of? I mean, it just blows my mind, even though I'm so used to it now. Should we care? Where do we go from here? How do we get US companies to make budget-friendly gear, for crying out loud? I'd love to see this kind of stuff coming out of the US, even if our US friends are making it overseas, as they always have. Anyway, so that's another story. Globalization, my friends. Now, if you haven't seen my video on the cheapest hot tent and stove on Temu, go watch this video next, and then gear up and get outside.